Time is the greatest gift we can give and receive. As we turn the clocks back this fall, Bristol Myers Squibb is recognizing oncologists who help give patients something extraordinary: more time. The Time Back campaign celebrates those everyday heroes who are working tirelessly in the pursuit of potentially helping give patients more time to experience key moments, like seeing a child learn to ride a bike or a long awaited vacation. As we turn back our clocks, let's pause to thank the doctors who make a difference every day. Discover more about the Time Back campaign and join Bristol Myers Squibb in celebrating the physicians who give the gift of more time at bms.com/timeback.
I understand there's some people that represent very, very blue states. I mean, they have the luxury of just saying we're all gas, no brakes. But when I represent a place like Pennsylvania, it keeps you honest. And now there's another side and trying to find a way forward. And then let's talk at numbers. In Pennsylvania, we had 2 million people on SNAP, and around 400,000 Pennsylvanians receive those tax credits. And now, right now, keeping our government shut down, they're getting neither.
My guest today, Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, has never exactly fit the mold of a typical U.S. senator. First of all, he's 6'8" and he favors hoodies and gym shorts over Brooks Brothers suits. He's written a new book called Unfettered, and he opens up about his 2022 stroke, his battle with depression, and his remarkable recovery. But since there's no such thing as a slow news day, I want to begin with the end of the government shutdown. Senator Fetterman, I know you were among the 8 senators who broke ranks with Democrats to advance the GOP plan to end the shutdown. Now, that isn't a surprise given how staunchly you oppose all government shutdowns. And I quote, "I will never, ever, 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 ever vote to shut our government down," which sounds like a riff of a Taylor Swift song, by the way. So why are you so opposed in general, Senator, to government shutdowns under any circumstance?
Well, I mean, if you have to bring Taylor Swift into it, now I have to flex that we were born at the same hospital, so maybe that's part of channeling that. Uh,
Okay.
no, but hey, why am I? For me, I think it's incredibly important, and it's very part of our values. And now remember, the last times the government was shut down, that was the Republicans, and we were rightly very, very critical of them because that's effectively holding our government hostage. And then when they were threatening to trying to do these things, we were very, very critical. And now when we arrived and decided to do that, I just voted to say, I think that's wrong. We can absolutely want to extend our tax credits, but that doesn't think it's appropriate to put 42 million Americans at food insecurity and not pay our military and not pay all of the unions attached by all of this thing. And remind people, too, a lot of you are going to be flying and making flying less safe. That is absolutely the wrong approach to fight for health insurance.
Yeah, I know that that must have been weighing on the minds of the 8 Democrats who wanted to come to some conclusion. How much did the upcoming Thanksgiving holidays weigh into this?
What I'm saying is, like, if we were locked in the way the majority of Democrats were, like, what's the exit ramp? Like, do we want 42 million Americans to not even have their food for Thanksgiving or to be able to travel in our nation? And now, in my state, in Philadelphia, 18 out of 22 air traffic controllers didn't show up to work. I mean, it's like that should be jarring to people because we all have an investment in making our flying safe. And you can want health insurance, as I do, but that means that you can't tax and create that kinds of chaos in that vital part of our economy, but also on a very big part of public safety.
In fact, you have said you quote strongly support those tax credits to make healthcare more affordable. But the deal, my understanding is the deal that you agreed to only guarantees a December vote. And even then, House Speaker Mike Johnson hasn't agreed to a House vote on the issue, making the chances of an extension increasingly bleak. So, what do you say to those like Bernie Sanders, who insists that this vote paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid and the likelihood that premiums will double, triple, or even quadruple for 20 million Americans?
Well, Bernie should answer why he's okay with putting 42 million Americans to face mass food insecurity, or he can explain to the military why it's okay not to pay them, and the tens of millions of American that are going to be flying and are flying, now for that. He can have his priorities, and I share some of those priorities to extend those tax credits. But we have a different tactic at this point, and there was no guarantee regardless for this because it's all going to come down to Trump, and he really has the ability to just change everything for things. So this idea that it's simple to achieve an ironclad kind of situation that just doesn't exist. And for me, that's a risk I refuse to take. And for them, they have a different view. But I think for a committed Democrat, I think our party should accommodate that. Hey, well, they might disagree, and I cite one of the governor elects, and she said that my big win was not a green light to extend the shutdown. That doesn't mean that they're not a connection.
Where do you put your positioning, Senator, in terms of kind of getting these healthcare issues resolved in a way that will not leave so many Americans with much higher premiums or, you know, kicked off Medicaid? Do you think Democrats are in a stronger or weaker position now to make those things happen
Well, I mean, this is
or to
also
prevent those things from happening, I should say?
like this is part of the truth too, that our party, my party, designed these to expire here. I mean, that was us. That wasn't the Republican changing that or doing anything. The Republicans saying we have to negotiate on these things. And if Republicans want this for their constituents, and it's entirely possible they do want those things, but open up the government and we can have that conversation. So that's also being straight on the facts. And that's like, that wasn't their plan. That's the way we designed that when we were in the firm majority. And that was part of the COVID pandemic. That's not just for like general normal times, right now. So here we are. And I also realize and recognize that there's part of the base that demands there must be some kinds of action. And then I felt like entirely after that election, that was a great uh, opportunity to take that win. And now it's very clear there's a lot of backlash for voters. The voters reject chaos. And now for me, when you're faced with that kinds of mad, crazy chaos, well, I think you should respond to order and logic and respond with our core values. And that's not putting 42 million Americans for mass food insecurity or supporting our military. I mean, today it's Veterans Day. And I think we want to honor them in part too. Let's pay our military. That's part of it too. And now I don't criticize someone's view that might share those, but my issue is that to attack the kinds of Democrats that happen to have a different view, that doesn't mean we're caving. It just means like, hey, maybe we have a different way of seeing things that are right there on the ground, and they can't really describe what their exit ramp is or how they can define it. So I understand there's some people that represent very, very blue states. I mean, they have the luxury of just saying we're all gas, no brakes. But when I represent a place like Pennsylvania, it keeps you honest. And now there's another side and trying to find a way forward. And then let's look at numbers. Let's talk at numbers. In Pennsylvania, we had 2 million people on SNAP, and around 400,000 Pennsylvanians receive those tax credits. And now, right now, keeping our government shut down, they're getting neither. And now, so it's a difference of an idea, but it's not really a political game. It's a it's a decision to keep our government down, and that's having a lot of major impact. So for me, that's really the essence of this argument.
Yeah, I interviewed Angus King yesterday, and he was one of well, he is an independent, but he was part of the group that wanted to negotiate a deal to get the government to reopen. And basically, his question was, what was the end game? How was a negotiation going to happen, given the fact that the Republicans weren't budging on this? What would your message be to Bernie Sanders right now if you could speak to him directly?
Hey, Bernie. Okay, well, I would respond with a question saying, "Hey, you're talking to a single mother with 3 kids, and there's nothing on their SNAP card. Tell them that, hey, just hang on. We got your back, but we are in a big political battle. It's like you just have to find your way forward."
Let me ask you about the response that you've gotten on social media. I was reading it yesterday, some of the comments but on threads. One woman wrote, "My 50-year-old, otherwise healthy husband has cancer. His treatment costs $547,000. We can't afford that. Your vote may very well kill my husband. His life and the lives of thousands of others are in your hands. So far, you're condemning them to death." Someone else writes, "You failed us and no longer deserve to represent us. Just go home and let us win the fight. We no longer need cowards around us. We embraced you when you were sick, donated to your campaign. You are so ungrateful. Shame on you." Another writes, "When I die, I want John Fetterman to be my pallbearer so he can let me down for the zillionth and final time, because dying is the only way I'll stop being appalled by him and all the knives he plunged into our backs." Finally, Lydia Russo writes, "Disgraceful capitulation, Senator. Shame on you." I'm curious to hear your reaction to those comments.
My only reaction is like my heart breaks, and I'm so sorry that they're in this difficult situation regarding their health. Absolutely, I'm so sorry to be in that. So regardless, now there are many people that are in the middle of this right now, and I'm sorry that they're caught in the middle of this political
They're blaming you, though, clearly, Senator, for basically, reopening the government and what they seem to believe is giving up the fight for health care for people like them. Any other response?
The response is just, I'm so sorry that you're in this situation." And now for me, I think shutting down our entire government is the appropriate way to achieve health insurance, and that's again, it's a tragedy, and I'm so sorry that they're in that situation.
Going back to the potential vote on these issues that Senator Thune sort of has given his word on, but Mike Johnson is being a little more slippery. What would you say to Mike Johnson about to support some of the people who are writing these kinds of comments?
I think that I lost the count of how many times I voted to extend those tax credits. I would be the first guy to vote for those kinds of a thing, and I'm not the guy stopping this. And there's not a single Democrat in the Capitol that wouldn't vote to extend those tax credits. Not a single one. And now democracy has put us in the minority, and we don't have a Democratic president as well either. So there's a lot of things working against that right now. And it's not about opening up the government. It's really about the situation that we are in right now. And what I can say to Mike Johnson is like, hey, let's do these folks right. Because plenty of their constituents are going to be touched by this too. And I do believe if it's going to impact that and they realize that it's bad politics and it's just bad for our nation, then we can find a way forward for these kinds of things.
I know, Senator, you've gotten a reputation for not always, quote unquote, falling in line with your fellow Democrats, being an independent voice. And in your book, Unfettered, you write, I've drunk deeply of the venom of both the left and the right, and the most poisonous, the bitterest, is from the far left. Those are strong words. Tell me why you wrote that and what motivated those comments.
Meaning, I think it's been my experience, and just anecdotally, I asked my digital folks. I said, what's the harshest, the harshest social?" And they said, "Oh, absolutely, it's blue sky, blue sky." It's been my experience. The right, you would say, really, mean things and call me names and that thing. But what's really emerged, often sometimes on the other side, it's like, hey, I know I'm rooting for your next stroke, or it sucks that depression didn't win, or I hope your kids, can just witness, you die, and all these kinds of things. Is there a difference between just saying mean things versus wishing my death, and saying those things? It's like people forget that there's a name attached to these things. So for me, it's really it's an indictment on social media. But what I'm saying, it's been in my experience that it's both difficult, but some of the most personal things are when someone's praying for my death and they want my children to find me there. It's like, I think that's a little next level versus, hey, I happen to disagree with you.
You've said that Donald Trump, in your view, is not an autocrat because his presidency is, quote, the product of a democratic election. But history has shown that even leaders who come to power through elections can still govern in anti democratic ways. So I have to ask, when you consider some of Donald Trump's behaviors and policies, like deploying federal forces to U.S. cities, undermining the Department of Justice's independence, attempting to overturn the 2020 election. Does that not trouble you deeply?
Well, of course. I was really the tip of the spear in the 2020 election in Pennsylvania, where he claimed that it wasn't like as a fair, safe election. Absolutely, I pushed back violently on that, and I don't support many of these things that are happening right now. I don't and never vote for those things. But now, for me, it's like, here we are. But I think at this point right now, we are not in an autocracy. We're in a democracy, and that's why they were able to shut our government down. And that doesn't mean that we appreciate what's happening. And that expression, it's not normal. It's like, yes, it isn't normal, but that doesn't mean this is an autocracy right now. And what it does mean that we have a lot of hills that we can choose to die on. But I think for me, I've just been choosing some of the most difficult ones, and that's where I've been, and not supporting, many of these things that are happening.
Do you think that Donald Trump is not conducting himself or not pushing policies, though, that you would consider to be anti democratic?
What I'm saying is a Democrat with a 90% record voting Democrat. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. That's my numbers.
No, I'm talking
Yeah,
about Donald Trump's
well,
some of the things that he's doing. If you don't believe we're living in an autocracy, would you concede that some of the things that he is doing are clearly anti-democratic
well,
and also are potentially even unconstitutional?
I guess, so for me, it's like, we have a difference here. It's like, if you believe we live in autocracy, and I don't. And I think we can both agree that we don't agree with the vast majority of those things that's happened here right now. And I wouldn't do those things. I wouldn't have made those same kind of decisions for that. And that's fine where we are right now, a committed Democrat, and we happen to have a different view of these things. It's like, I don't call people fascists or Nazis or compare people to Hitler. And I think that's part of why we lost our election last year. If you call the person that you might vote for, that implies that you must be a fascist or you're trying to destroy, our nation. And I know and I love some of those people, and they're not doing any of those things. So that's really the thing. So, and the vast majority of Americans, chose that, an option that I did not choose, and actually campaigned the entire, effectively the year, for Harris and Biden before he dropped out. So that's exactly where we are.
I know that you write about your wife, Giselle, who came to the US as an undocumented immigrant before eventually becoming an American citizen. So I know, Senator, you sort of have a front row seat to the process. And when you think about her story, I wonder how you square that with the way the Trump administration is handling immigration, from the ICE raids to the broader rhetoric around migrants in this country.
Yeah, well, I think that's why two things must be true, and it's fully compatible. I remain one of the most pro immigration senator in the entire Senate. And I also happen to believe it's mass chaos when we have 300,000 people showing up at our border every month. And, acknowledging that my party did a terrible job on securing our border during the Biden administration. For me, chaos is that you have these ICE raids and targeting, otherwise hardworking migrants. I don't support those things. I'm appalled by those things. But I think also there's significant chaos about we need to have a secure our border. And now for me, two things must be true. We have to secure our border, and we also think it's anti-American to target these kinds of populations in this kinds of way. That's really the truth.
But which begs the question, shouldn't there be another way to do both of those things in terms of securing the border? It's my understanding, Senator, and maybe you can clarify it for me and for people watching and listening, that there was a bipartisan immigration bill that was really worked out by Republicans and Democrats over the course of many, many months, that Donald Trump urged his fellow Republicans not to vote on, because he instead wanted to use it as a campaign uh, talking point, and to, in fact, weaponize the whole issue of immigration. So, couldn't a vote have happened that would have maybe provided some solutions for these issues at the border, and not had this situation where these ICE agents are racially profiling people? They're separating kids from their families. ICE agents are driving off with toddlers in the back seats and car seats. They're pulling out preschool teachers in front of children in Chicago. I mean, I could go on and on. But why didn't the Senate vote on this comprehensive immigration legislation before the campaign?
Well, I voted for that. All Democrats did. But I also knew that we would get rolled on it because, of course, we're going to get rolled on that because that is one of his biggest clubs. He's not going to hand that over and take that him away. And he was able to derail all of that and he wasn't even the president at that time. So for me, it's like that's the same right now, and that's part of the argument why we could have a deal. While our government is shut down right now to Thanksgiving or whatever, and then okay, here's the deal on extending those tax credits. Well, hey, by the way, no, that's not going to happen. Like it's the same kind of similar situation in the middle of 42 million Americans, rely on that to feed themselves and their families and all those things. Now, so that's where we are. I fully expected that there wasn't going to be a bipartisan deal because that is one of his major things he used to 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 win, honestly.
I know, and I guess that's why I wonder if it's fair to blame the
Of
Biden
course it's not fair.
administration,
Of course it's not fair.
to blame, well, you just did blame the Democrats for not doing a good job at the border, and I understand what you're saying. At the same time, there was this bipartisan legislation which would have addressed the issue at the border, but Donald Trump wouldn't allow the Republicans to vote for it because he didn't want to give them a win, as you just said. So it seems to me that, to give him credit, when he actually was, you know, an impediment, right, to getting this legislation passed, seems misplaced, if you know what I'm saying.
No, not really.
You don't know what I'm saying here?
No,
So
I mean, what I'm saying, it's like, um, people negotiated a bipartisan deal because the Democrats finally realized, yes, it's a mess there. And then the population the size of Pittsburgh was showing up at the border every month, every month. And now they were eager to trying to find a deal because they knew we would pay a significant price for the election. And then I expected that the president would, well, actually, he wasn't the president at the time. He controls the party, and it's like, hey, no, no, no way. And that's what happened. And that's where we're at now. And I had a professor at grad school, Alan Simpson, if you can remember.
I remember him.
Yeah, yeah. He said, he told me this back in 1998. And remember, he was a Republican, a pro choice Republican from Wyoming. That's how things have changed. Regardless, he said, you're never going to have any significant immigration uh, kinds of a deal because both sides use it and it's too useful for people to have an actual solution right now. And he said that at that point over a quarter century ago. And that's where we were for that. And I voted for it. I did, but on one vote. And unfortunately, more people would have voted for it. And that's part of where we are.
Yeah, I guess my point is, Senator, we wouldn't be in this situation if Donald Trump hadn't prevented Republicans from moving this legislation forward. We wouldn't have ICE agents deployed to all these cities across the country. We would have solved some of the immigration problems at the border if that legislation had been allowed to pass.
Yeah, legislation that I voted for, and we
Right,
didn't
but
and
that's
we
what I'm
didn't have
saying, you know? I'm
yeah.
saying that a solution was at hand, and yet Donald Trump, because he wanted to use it as a campaign weapon, stopped it from moving forward. That's all. That's my understanding.
Absolutely. In fact, I think he effectively said the same thing. Yeah, it's like, "Yeah, blame me, blame me." I mean, I think he's even said that.
In this conversation, we're going to look at the profound support oncologists provide, guiding patients and families through difficult moments while helping give back milestones and key life moments. Monica, I have had to interact with a number of oncologists during my life. Can you talk about the support aspect of an oncologist's role?
The role of oncologists is really one that I have so much admiration for people that are stepping into that space, because having to stay up to date with that science and that medicine while retaining your humanity and being able to engage people on that one-to-one space is something that's a very, very special relationship.
In fact, Monica, I read that oncologists may be in a position to have to tell families not great news as many as 20,000 times over the course of their career.
Isn't that an incredible number to think about? And the way the human mind works is that we often remember the bad more than we remember the good. And I think one of the ways that we can support oncologists is by reminding them that they are also there for the positive parts of that cancer journey.
Well, I too, having known many in my 68 years, am so appreciative that I have an opportunity to say thank you on behalf of patients everywhere and their families.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Katie. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Please come and visit us at bms.com/timeback, and you can learn more there about our commitment to oncologists and the time back that they potentially can give to patients.
As we've heard, oncologists don't just treat cancer. They aim to return precious time, helping people savor celebrations big and small, from birthdays to watching a child's baseball game. Time is the greatest gift we can give and receive. As we turn the clocks back this fall, Bristol-Myers Squibb is recognizing oncologists who help give patients something extraordinary: more time. The Time Back campaign celebrates those everyday heroes who are working tirelessly in the pursuit of potentially helping give patients more time to experience key moments, like seeing a child learn to ride a bike or a long-awaited vacation. As we turn back our clocks, let's pause to thank the doctors who make a difference every day. Discover more about the Time Back campaign and join Bristol Myers Squibb in celebrating the physicians who give the gift of more time at bms.com/timeback. Let's talk about your support of Israel. You've been criticized by some in your party for your steadfast support of Israel. And I know that you write in the book that some former staffers turned on you because of it. And you've since implied that your support of Israel has to do, and they have implied that your support of Israel has to do with your impaired mental health, with which you say is not true. Can you talk about this criticism and the larger split it represents in your party between progressives and moderates?
Well, I don't have anything to comment on those things, but yes, it's absolutely true. Israel has divided Democrats without a doubt, and I remained an unapologetic supporter of Israel, and that's where I am, and I was proud to do that unapologetically. So, and now here we are. Now you have actual peace here in the region, and I think that's a profound outcome. And after what Israel was able to achieve, they were able to break and effectively destroy Hamas, Hezbollah as well too, and now Iran. You know, their nuclear facilities clearly trying to acquire a nuclear weapon, and I absolutely supported those strikes as well too. And now here we are in a position now for real peace, and I think that's a good thing. And I just call balls and strikes. It's like I can celebrate those things regardless of who it's coming from.
Having said that, I'm curious, do you have any issue with Benjamin Netanyahu and the response to the October 7th attacks, which killed nearly 70,000 people, about half of whom are women and children, along with about 9,500 people missing and presumed dead, according to the Gaza Ministry of Health? I'm just curious if your steadfast support of Israel has ever wavered when you consider the response to October 7th, which many believe was disproportionate.
Well, what I believe that the tragedy in Gaza, absolutely undeniably, it was a tragedy. Now you have a choice. Do you blame Israel, which I don't, or I blame Hamas? I blame Iran, and I blame some of those nations in the region that didn't hold Hamas accountable. And you have to pick a side. I'm absolutely going to pick the democratically elected leader of our ally, and that they project and protect the kinds of values that we live and we want in our nation. And that's a choice, for now too. So for me, if I am going to criticize one side, it's going to be entirely on the people that what they've done on 10/7 and that they keep human beings underground for 2 years. I've met with them and the nightmares that they've been through as well too. Absolutely. That's a tragedy. And now there's peace. And now we can rebuild Gaza, and there's perhaps a better solution. Now, remember, if Hamas has not done what they've done, all of these people would still be alive, and or if they would have chosen a two-state solution that President Clinton produced back in 1999. I had a chance to talk to him at a campaign event that I had with Kamala Harris, and he reminded they were offered 96%, and they could pick 4% for Israel, and they could have East Jerusalem as the capital, and they would have had a two-state solution, and they rejected that. So there's some accountability when they had a two-state solution. It really, the truth there is that they is a one nation solution, and that's no Israel, and wiping it out. And also, I guess if you're harsh, I'd be harsh on Iran. Why are they trying to build a bomb? And they've promised to destroy it. That's one of their organizing principles, is to destroy Israel, trying to build a nuclear bomb. I'm going to criticize that before I criticize Israel, because they refuse to send on the hostages and to disarm. That's the way wars operate.
Do you have any solution for bridging the intense divide that this has resulted in for the Democratic Party?
Yeah, that's difficult, and I'm convinced that younger voters, they're gone, and now I think I've seen polls where they identify more with Hamas than Israel, and I think that's part of TikTok and social media that created a bubble and devoid of history and devoid of a lot of the situation on ground. And most people don't remember or even knew that they had an opportunity for a two-state solution to be and to build their own nation in peace, but they strongly rejected that.
Do you think this is irreparable within the party? I know you talked about it being generational. Do you think there's any way to find common ground when it comes to the topic of Israel for Democrats in general?
Well, absolutely. I don't know if I guess though. I think part of the issue that with some Democrats, most of it came from, much of it came from is my support for Israel, and anyone that can look up my record to vote 90% the Dem line, you know, from a very purple state like Pennsylvania. I think that would identify me as a committed Democrat. I'm not changing my party, and I had a very strong support for Israel, and that's I don't know, but what I can say that picking a side for this, it was a very easy choice. If you study the history or if you can see the circumstances right there on the ground.
I'm curious to get your reaction, Senator Fetterman, to the election of Zohran Mamdani as the new mayor of New York City. I'm sure you were following this race pretty closely. What do you make of his victory here?
I wasn't following it closely, and I would have no strong opinion with him, but people keep asking because I knew it would become a litmus. And he's not my mayor. I don't live in New York City, and he will have virtually no impact on my life or my politics. And that
I
was
guess it's more of I guess I was asking more as like, your reaction in terms of what it signals to the Democratic Party, probably more than the impact he'll have on your life or your constituents, you know?
Well, what it again, it won't have any impact, in the politics that's are required to win the next presidential election. It's not going to come down to how New York City votes. It's going to depend on how my state votes. And now another thing, it's like when 50% plus one wins, then that means one person supports you, and that means there's another one that opposes you. In a very deep blue city, in a deeply divided by him, is going to be the next mayor. I truly wish him the best. I would never root against it. I'm going to root for anyone because I'm rooting for New York City. It's a magnificent city, and that's where we are. And people keep asking me, "Well, what's your opinion on him?" And I'm like, it's like that's their next mayor, and it's like I am the Pennsylvania senator, and we have different values, and that's the circumstances, and that's here we are, and I'm not surprised. And I've predicted that that's going to become a significant part of the messaging for the GOP, and they've used that.
President Trump himself has called you, quote, the most sensible Democrat. And I know you met with him in January. You say in part because you wanted to, quote, find kinship and common ground over the fact that you had both come face to face with death. I'm curious, what were your impressions of him? Can you tell us a little bit about that meeting and what you thought of him in general?
Well, they reached out and they wanted to invite me to attend dinner. And that was in January before he was even took the office. And as a senator for Pennsylvania and the president, would like to meet with you, I think that's part of the party. And I think that's pretty reasonable to say, okay, sure, absolutely. That doesn't mean we agree on everything. And that's what I decided to do. And we spoke for about 75 minutes, and overall, and my wife was there too. And we even discussed possibly, hey, could there be a deal about about the dreamers, you know, and again, like I just wanted to have that, and I'm again, you talked about immigration, I'm constantly. It's like I would love to protect the dreamers, absolutely, and that's part of my wife's story. She came here when she was 7 years old. I agree, and that's why I had dinner with him. And if a Republican, got an offer to have dinner with Obama, and if he or she said absolutely not, whatever, I think people would be like, why not? Why not? It's like, what's the big deal? What's the problem? So
I
that's
don't think anybody's suggesting you shouldn't have met with him. I just wanted to
well, a
know
lot of people
your
have.
well, maybe well, I wasn't. I just wanted to know your impressions of him. Was he receptive to your ideas? Did he strike you as a different person than he is on, say, social media? And in some of his rhetoric, I was just curious.
Profoundly different, absolutely profoundly different, than his public persona. Absolutely different. And one of the reason why I did that, because we both survived a near death experience, and it really changed me. And I was wondering, hey, did that change your life? Because you had probably the most profound political turnaround that we could ever recall. And you've been shot in your head, and that bullet, it could have been just a little to the left, I guess to the right. And can you imagine the place our nation would have been if that would have happened? But regardless, though, and I hoped that this created an opportunity to do big things and different things. And quickly, I discovered that, yeah, the vast majority of things he's going to do weren't the kinds of choices I wouldn't have made to be in that situation, because to understand that kinds of death, whether it's because of a medical one for me or an assassin, I took that in, and that's one of the reasons why I did that.
Did he seem affected? How did it change him? What did he tell you about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't that be impacted by when you get shot in the head, and the only reason you're alive is because it missed being
Well, what
fake.
did he tell you about that?
No, of course not. I'm not going to talk about that. That must have been, one of the worst moments in his life. Like, I mean, if he would have brought it up, I could, but I'm certainly not going to bring that up. I mean, that's basic courtesy for me, because that happened in my state. I was 30 minutes away when it happened, and I was just, oh my God, And after we've seen what happened to Charlie Kirk, and can you imagine if it was that same kind of a terrible thing, if it was him? I mean, uh, Charlie Kirk's assassination roiled the nation. Imagine if that was President Trump. Imagine what that would have done for our nation overall. And thank God, that did not happen. And I didn't agree with many things of Charlie Kirk, but it was entirely appropriate to allow people to grieve and give people that respect and the space to do that, and not take that opportunity to push an argument or to remind people that, hey, I don't agree, blah, blah, blah. It's like a father of young children was shot in public because of his political views. And that's a tragedy, and give people the space to grieve.
Having said that, I'm curious, do you think that flags should have been flown at half staff? Do you think his body should have been flown on Air Force Two? Do you think he should have posthumously be given the Presidential Medal of Freedom? I think some people felt that that was perhaps over the top in terms of mourning someone like Charlie Kirk. How did you feel about that?
I'd say that was his choice and his prerogative, and that's where that was really entirely up to him.
Did you have any issues now in hindsight over some of the things that Charlie Kirk said and some of the rhetoric he used during his life?
I didn't agree with much of it. I didn't closely followed his specific kinds of views, but I did.
I'm sure you learned about them after his death, though.
No, I haven't done a deep dive on it. I described, I mean, we've all seen that terrible video. Perhaps if you've seen the actual video, I have. And it's like appalling. And that's part of the political violence. And from what I'm saying, it's like that's unacceptable. And engaging in a debate and views I strongly disagree on, that's part of the American democracy. And for me, it's that would never justify what's happened. And I just chose not to take the opportunity to argue his views after after children lost his father in the most violent public way. I mean, so that's I would say the equivalent. The equivalent on the left might be, say, Mr. Piker. I strongly disagree with his views, but I'm appalled if something like that happened to him. Oh my God. I mean, that's, like we have to disagree in better ways where, you're going to solve it by shooting people. And that's why the kinds of rhetoric, we have to turn the temperature down. Extreme rhetoric makes it easier for extreme reactions or to justify them.
I think some people might say Charlie Kirk's rhetoric was extreme. I think that's the conversation that happened. People condemned political violence, but they also felt a great deal of discomfort with his language, suggesting that these kinds of words lead to violence. I don't know. I'm just kind of sharing my observations as I saw the conversations unfold.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we agree that we probably didn't agree with much of what he said, and I think I'm sure we both agree that you shouldn't shoot people, and you shouldn't execute them in public. And I think that's two things must be true. That free speech, I'm an absolute speech guy, and you have the right to say these things, and you definitely also have the right not to get shot by sharing your views.
Let's talk a little more about your book in the time we have left, Senator. It is incredibly raw and transparent, particularly about your mental and physical health. You didn't need to write a book like this, and I'm curious why you decided to be so radically honest and put so much of your own story out there.
Oh, thank you for that phrase, radically honest. Because the only reason to do it is if you're going to be honest. For me, I think it's an important conversation. I know it may not be a big political win to talk about these topics, but millions of American I know suffer from that. And appropriately on Veterans Day, where we're talking, 18 veterans take their lives every day, 18. And I think I was the first public official to talk about suicide. And I strongly, strongly considered that because that's the danger of depression. And I know people have been there. I lost people that I cared deeply through suicide, and they've left young children or grandchildren, and it's heartbreaking. And now that message is stay in the game. And after winning the biggest election in the cycle, that's actually when depression really, really hit. And then I started to have some of the darkest conversations and trying to describe to people, I'm not an expert, I'm not in training, but I have experienced that awful, awful sickness. And I don't want this for you. But if someone is in that, it's like stay in the game and keep it as simple as you can, because the lie of depression is that the best solution is to take yourself out. And that is the awful choice you can't ever come back from.
And you not only talk about your depression, but obviously the stroke that you suffered, and how that all transpired. You were basically with your wife. It was in 2022. You had launched your second campaign for Senate, and 4 days before the primary, you were on your way to a campaign event when your wife Giselle noticed your mouth was drooping slightly. Can you share with us what unfolded from there?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I was on my way to a campaign at Millersville University, and I literally just went into a Sheets. If you're not familiar with like a Sheets, it's like a gas station and a food place. Pennsylvania really would know that. And I was in going to the bathroom, and I walked out and I sat in the car, and Giselle said, "My God, you're having a stroke." And I'm like, "No, no, you're not. No, I'm not." And half of my face, apparently, and I didn't know that, was drooping. And thankfully, I was in Lancaster, and they have an incredible facility. And that was, we actually drove directly to the hospital, and those doctors quite literally saved my life. And I actually had the opportunity to shake his hand and meet him. And I got to actually give him a hug for saving my life. And if that would have happened at 1 a.m., I would have never woke up. Or that could have happened in a remote part of Pennsylvania during the campaign. I wouldn't have survived probably. So that's how it, no one knows when they're living their last 15 minutes. And at that point, walking into a men's room at Sheets, I was, and I had no idea, and that was coming.
The fall of 2022 was brutal. You were still recovering from the stroke as the campaign heated up. Mehmet Oz's team attacked you relentlessly. You write that their ads got into your head, that you began to believe some of the insults, and that if the deadline to drop out had been in September instead of August, you would have. Can you take us back to that time, Senator, and tell us the kind of pressure you were under, both physically and mentally, and how that led into your depression?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I was attacked relentlessly and called all kinds of terrible, terrible names. And now I had to make a choice: are you able to recover and to be an effective candidate? And actually, the last day to withdraw was my birthday, August 15th. And by that point, all the polls and everything and our campaign, we were, I guess, that poll tracker, that 538, had us about an 84% chance of winning, and things were going really well. So, and I continued to get better, so I stayed in it. But then the absolute blowtorch turned on in September, and the $100 million of paid media and everything immediately hit, and that all hit all at once, and that was incredibly intense, and and then that was part of the breakdown. And then I chose to have a debate, and I knew that would be rough. That would be
Yeah,
rough.
talk about that debate, Senator, because that was rough, and I'm curious how you experienced it in real time and how you dealt with the aftermath.
I knew it would be a rough, and plenty of people were saying, "That's crazy. Just duck." I mean, plenty time people duck, but I said, "Hey, I'm not afraid of it." And it's like, this is an honest assessment of where we're at, and I don't have any regret. And now, after that, um, I was convinced that that might be it. And I'm sure many, many Democrats were just, "Oh my God, what happened here?" And that's and yeah, I absolutely own probably the worst political debate in American history.
And you write, simply quoting my words does not do justice to just how awful the moment was. Nobody knew where I stood on the issue. I looked bewildered, hardly someone on the road to recovery. The clip would be played over and over and over, popping up seemingly everywhere in my sleep, in the shower, in the car, on the sidewalk, where everyone you passed was whispering it. That must have been so hard. I mean, it's how how did you stay in the race? How did you convince yourself that you just had to hang in there and that you had to kind of dig deep and find resilience and not be defeated by that performance?
Yeah, well, the way we designed that, the debate was, that was October 25th, and the election was effectively 2 weeks later. And then after that debate, we continued to campaign, and at that point, uh, I became convinced that it was going to slip away after that, and that was part of the pressure, and that's when you can spend over $100 million, and say terrible things, and then also the right the right online war machine, absolutely kind of bear down. And because that was the most important race, and everybody needed to hold that seat.
I think that you've been so transparent about your health, about your stroke, Senator, about the depression you experienced, but in some ways it's been turned against you. On one hand, people might argue the public has a right to know about the fitness of an elected official. Um, but how do you draw the line between fair accountability and unfair intrusion? Do you think there is a line, or do you think it's the public's right to know everything about sort of a politician's health?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really up to voters to decide. It's not up to me to decide. And that's why I was absolutely transparent. And that's why I chose to do a debate. And I put myself in front, a debate that I can't imagine millions of people were watching. Like that's about as transparent as you could possibly be, knowing that was going to be a rough moment. I didn't show up thinking, oh yeah, I can win. I mean, Dr. Oz is an incredibly capable communicator. I mean, he lives on TV. I mean, he made his career on that. I mean, you know that. So of course, and I might have assumed that's how it would go. But that's about being transparent, and that's why I'm able to own it and have this conversation and now part of this book. Because after surviving all of those things, most people would have been elated after winning, but the exact thing happened. And after I got so beaten down, and they even put up a gigantic billboard as I drive into my hometown, with a terrible picture and everything. Every time I drive in, I have to see these. I couldn't get away, and my my parents couldn't get away from it. On all the channels everywhere online. My kids and their social media feed and for those things. In fact, now, um, and now that's that was it. And then finally, after winning, that I didn't expect to even win, and then I turned on myself, and that's why I decided that probably the best solution is to take my life.
That's right. In fact, you're incredibly open in the book about your darkest moments, even writing about contemplating suicide by jumping off the Rankin Bridge when your depression was at its worst. What was that difficult to write? And looking back on it now, Senator, are you surprised at how bad it got?
No, I mean, yeah, it's difficult, but it affirms I am really the luckiest guy alive. This was the paradox that, after dying medically after the stroke, and able to survive, and then I decided that, like I almost took myself out after surviving the stroke. And that is dark. And it's not easy to talk about, but it's important to talk because that's why I'm begging people that are in that same place. After you just won the biggest race, I considered jumping off a bridge. I planned these kinds of a thing. And it's like that's quite a paradox. And I see these things happen, like that young man that played for the Dallas Cowboys. He had his first NFL touchdown and he shot himself. And it's like tragic, tragic. Every suicide is an individual tragedy and all the lives that are touched by that. That's why we have to have this conversation. There's an absolute epidemic in our nation for that. Depression is bipartisan. you know, it doesn't check, hey, are you a Republican? Are you rural? Are you urban? Are you liberal? It's like that happens to anybody. And so that's where I'm having this conversation.
Is that who this book is really for? People who might be experiencing some of the darkest moments of their lives as you did, and to talk to them about the way out of this kind of deep depression and finding the will to live?
Oh my gosh. My children saved my life without a doubt. They saved my life. One of the young staffers, she just kind of stepped out of role and she said, your kids need their daddy, and that really, because I didn't want to meet with them because I assumed that they assumed they were ashamed of me, or they didn't want me anymore. And then I met with them and I found out that they did love me and they need me back in their lives. And that really spontaneously, you know, got me out of it. And that was my gift. That was the emergency brake. And I cannot ever have a legacy of suicide to be the solution for my children when they have struggles in their life. Well, then if dad did that, that must be the right thing. I cannot allow that to be my legacy. And that's part of the tragedy of the people that I know of. They've left children and grandchildren. And that's not a judgment. My heart breaks for them. I got lucky. And that's why this conversation is to hope that there is one less people more that chooses that the right thing is to take their own life. And if a US senator can make that choice, or a player in the NFL can do that, or veterans, regardless, that's an important conversation because to experience it and live with that awful, awful kinds of feelings, I don't want that for anybody. And I try to be a voice or a resource to someone like, okay, I promise to keep myself in this game. And I've had conversations with members of Congress and parents with their kids, staffers, other people, and they've taken strength or inspiration from that. I never really thought that voice would penetrate, but it did. And if it did, it's an honor. It's an honor to affirm that it's always, always, always the wrong choice to take your life. And depression is awful. And it's the lie to convince you the best solution is having a world without you. And I think I was the first person to ever talk about it as a public official. And I remember after that, President Biden actually shared that he had a moment in life where he considered to take his life, and that's important too, to have people in these positions to say, "Hey, this is very human, and it must be you, and it's okay, and things will get better."
Do you think as a senator, I'm just curious hearing you speak this way, is there more that can be done in terms of national policies to provide more support to people who are going through the kind of depression you experienced and other mental health challenges? Is there enough being done?
I sure hope so, and I want to be a part of every conversation about it. And I'm trying to create conversations about this because I've had people reach out since this book come out, or immediately after when I've been having these interviews. I know politically it's not necessarily a winner, but I think it's honest. And I think a lot of people that haven't shared it publicly would know that they face these same kinds of circumstances. And the one choice you can't ever recover from is taking your life. And people all know that have had a serious attempt to take their lives by jumping off a bridge. 100% of those people spontaneously realized, oh my God, this is a mistake. I want to live. I want to live. And now they were able to survive, and that spontaneously cured that depression. And they realized that awful choice that you have just made.
You've really been through it, Senator. Your list of medical issues is long: a minor stroke, atrial fibrillation, cardiomyopathy, clinical depression. I'm curious if you continue to receive regular medical treatment for your depression and other health issues, and how you would describe your current physical and mental shape.
Well, there's just nothing but great news. Now I'm proud to say that my heart functions at a fully normal function. I don't suffer from those things because that I describe in that. And I use a pacemaker, and I don't have AFib anymore. And AFib was the thing that I inherited from my father. And in May of 23, my father collapsed in the kitchen, and I got that awful call in my office. And now he was on a ventilator for a month, and I had to stand by his bed, uh, and then I have what the kind of the stress my experience is, that part of it, having to watch all of these attack ads, and then having to visit my father sitting by his bed. Like, I visualize if I was sitting aside the bed of my son, if he could be dying. Um, has that contributed to that eventually? And that's heartbreaking. But he made a full recovery, which is remarkable. And one day, we turned to each other and said, "We both should be dead, and we both are the luckiest guy alive, and we just can only celebrate, to be here right now and affirm." Just it might sound trite to appreciate life, but I think Warren Zevon, you know, enjoy every sandwich in that way, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoy my life, and I'm so grateful. And in the middle of how devices our politics are and how terrible that it is, I want to find a way forward and to be a voice. I don't know if that's the winning lane, but it happens to be my lane, and I've lost the taste to just be, say these kinds of things. It comes from a place of deep, deep gratitude because I should be dead. I should be dead. And I've got a second chance by surviving a stroke that I guess technically did take my life, but I came back and I was able to overcome, the choice to even take your own life. And that's why I'm paying this forward. And I don't have any grudges. I really wanted to say thank you for every opportunity and to be the voice through an epidemic and a scourge here, and to be the kind of voice in politics in the middle of this that we really should, and we have forgotten that we need each other. And it's getting more and more difficult to remember that we need each other and we all live together. And I know people and love people that voted for President Trump, but that doesn't mean that they're terrible. It just means we have to find a way to work together and get along. And America will celebrate Thanksgiving, and we all will be in close proximity to people. And so that's people are three-dimensional. It's not just how they happen to vote, and that's a way forward. And describing my own death, both medically and suicide, is an important conversation, but also having a conversation of why I chose to break cloture, and that's why I'm touched by that story that you referenced online, that her husband is suffering in such a terrible way. Um, so it's like it's part of the tragedy, but it's like the solution means that we can all find a way to work together on things, as difficult as it is.
How have you been able to manage your depression? Obviously, this is something that doesn't sort of magically necessarily go away. Any advice for people who are struggling in terms of not being afraid of medication and therapy, et cetera?
Well, I'm saying, like, I don't know what your path could be. Try, find whatever's available. And as long as you promise yourself that you're going to stay in the game, you can emerge, and you don't have to believe the lie of taking yourself out. And that's my advice, honestly. And with depression for me, like, I've been just the way I've been able to rebuild my heart. I've also haven't suffered from the kind of depression and after, as in this deeply, deeply divided time, I find it affirming why it's like, it's an honor. It's an honor to be a voice for Pennsylvania. And if I've disappointed some of my fellow Democrats, for that, I'm truly sorry. But I don't judge them on their views, and I hope they would afford the same level of respect for mine. But reminding people, as a Democrat, as a 90% Democrat voter, we are allowed to have different views because we need to be a big tent Democrat in order to win, the big elections. Um, and that's where we are. And I am absolutely rooting for the mayor of New York. I don't agree with many of his views, but that's an important city. It's a beautiful city, and it's like I want him to be successful, and that's where we are. We have to agree to get a way forward, regardless of their political views.
Given everything you've been through, Senator, I'm amazed that you've decided to stay in politics, a line of business that you yourself describe as sometimes poisonous. And how do you find the the strength and resilience to continue to fight when it has become such a blood sport and probably not the healthiest line of work for someone like you?
Well, it's like you have interviews with NFL players, and they will ask them the question, "Would you want your sons playing in the NFL?" And increasingly, more and more are saying, No, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Now, I wouldn't recommend that, and thankfully, none of my own children are. They haven't been bit by that bug. But I would recommend anybody that it's increasingly becoming a contact sport, and people often forget one of the accelerants is social media. And if you drop something online and call people and say rough things, it touches people because there's a name attached to that screen and they absorb those things. And that I did the mistake of reading through all those, after the election. And yes, there were terrible things said, but it was the volume of it, just millions of views or millions of things. And I'm like, where did this come from? For someone that I had different views than you and the kinds of hate and the wishes for your death and for those things. Have we just kind of lost ourselves in a way? And that's part of the important conversation where if you receive some kind of a relief to say something like that online, but I promise you it doesn't make our nation more just or safe or more healthy, you are contributing to the actually that's actually helping destroy our democracy too. Some very not different than a lot of these destructive kinds of choices that I don't support that have happened during under the Trump administration. So for me, it's like it's a person attached, and if you wouldn't want that for you, it's like I have a rule. Like I wouldn't say anything on social media that I wouldn't say to somebody in person right now. And I think that's a good rule because it's hard to say things if you sit down or talk to them and say, okay, well, we can agree or we can disagree on these things without saying these things. And we all have to remind, I do too. I mean, all of these things, it can get intense sometimes, but we can't forget that humanity because it really does impact people, especially children. Truly, truly heartbreaking things are children that are bullied into suicide. Oh my God, that's just awful. One of the children's parents that reached out, I met with him. 15 years, tried to kill himself twice. He was in a hospital, and I'm like, please, I beg you on that. So for me, we got to be kinder to people because it has an impact because it had an impact on mine. And I don't think it should have taken it personal, but it feels very personal when people spend the time to jump on their phone and just unload on a person that's you probably never even met them in person. So that's the truth. That's the truth. And unlimited money in our politics is part of also the indictment when somebody can accrue $120 million to absolutely destroy your reputation and create a carpet bombing, absolutely annihilate your reputation and say things that have no basis in reality. That's perfectly legal, and that's what's to be expected. And my race was around $320 million. That was the most expensive, other than non-presidential, and that was quickly eclipsed. Ohio was over $500 million, $500 million to absolutely pulverize. someone else's reputation that are largely not even based in reality. Unlimited money is really the true cancer on our democracy. Eliminate that, you remove a lot of the poisonous influences, because unlimited money means unlimited venom is coming, and it's going to continue to escalate.
It sounds like this book in some ways is a plea for us to restore our own humanity. It's your story. It's about your journey, but it's also kind of a message to the wider population.
Yeah, well, like I think I it's been worth it to me, because I've had people reach out saying, that this conversation has saved their life, or that's made them feel better in their life, or that chose to get help. And Sophia, that's really the point of it. And my voice and my vote is is consistent to the values that I've always had before the stroke. But before that, and things have changed. The circumstances have changed, and it's like I've chose to just try to play uh, balls and strikes. And some people are going to agree or disagree on those things, but that's here we are, and describing those difficult circumstances now, trying to explain or to describe to people why I chose to be. I mean, the media was putting the effect of the wanted posters, the eight Dems, here it is, like hanging up in the post office kind of thing, and it's like, I know all of them, and I know the eight ones that did that. They are deeply honorable, patriotic people, and they happen to disagree, and that doesn't make them bad people. And you might be disappointed, and they have the right to do that. But we believe that there was a no exit ramp that wasn't going to drop our nation into deeper kinds of chaos, especially the people that are deeply touched by that, whether they're on SNAP or they are not getting paid going on for a month and a half. So, yeah, that's been my message, and having them all converge at the exact same time. Um, that's where I am, and I am grateful to be able to have this conversation. And I could have. It's Yeah. I don't want to dwell on that, but what I've learned is that I can only emerge as profoundly grateful.
Well, John Fetterman, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you for having this long conversation with me. The book is called Unfettered, and I think it will help a lot of people. And as you said, it already has. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for talking with me about it.
No, thank you for spending. You were very generous with your time. I dedicated the book to those people in that struggle, people in the throes of depression that are considering it, and I beg people to not make the one mistake you can't come back from. So thank you for allowing me to have this conversation on your platform.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you, Senator. And I'll let you get back to all the stuff you have to do. The vote happened, right? Now we're waiting for the House.
Correct. Yeah. There's a statutorial where the earliest time they can do that is tomorrow night. Tomorrow night. And to be clear, it is not guaranteed. It is not. It is not. We are not living in normal times. We all agree, and something very, very abnormal could happen. And one of thing abnormal was this solution that came up. I didn't know that. I found out that, hey, something reached. I assumed this was the recess. I mean, technically we shouldn't even be here, but here we are. Because so I wish that the solution sticks. But if it doesn't, but I'd like to remind everybody, everyone that's listening that was as angry or disappointed that we reopened the government, we will have the same opportunity to do this in January. you know and so it's a long slog. We're not even to the first year of the Trump presidency, and that's 4 years. So that's why I'm begging people that it's like we have to find a way forward. And the election is coming in less than a year, and that's where we are, and that's where my values and voice will remain.
Time is the greatest gift we can give and receive. As we turn the clocks back this fall, Bristol Myers Squibb is recognizing oncologists who help give patients something extraordinary: more time. The Time Back campaign celebrates those everyday heroes who are working tirelessly in the pursuit of potentially helping give patients more time to experience key moments, like seeing a child learn to ride a bike or a long-awaited vacation. As we turn back our clocks, let's pause to thank the doctors who make a difference every day. Discover more about the Time Back campaign and join Bristol Myers Squibb in celebrating the physicians who give the gift of more time at bms.com/timeback.